to wrap it up. We're going to make tonight, although much more can be said. It's very hard to distill the content of all these things into just a small sections. It really is. There's so much that is taking place. But we'll hit some high points, and I encourage you to continue to read on. We probably won't be able to mention everything that I'd like to tonight, but nonetheless, we'll continue on with some of the very very good aspects of church history, or very informative things. What is going on in there?
They're in that room,
Last thing what was
and
going on when I got here.
they're bouncing off the walls.
Literally. Yes.
Actually, I'm just going to just peek your head and they'll stop.
Yeah, I will. I'll be right back.
Ooh, can I come?
No, you can't.
All the adults in the room, no.
Alright.
Usually there's a teacher there, but a lot of times she's looking a little overwhelmed.
I can hear why.
They're headed upstairs. So.
They see you come out.
He's come for us.
Well, actually, they go into the other room.
Yeah, well, they're headed from the room up the ramp there.
I heard
So
them go up the ramp, yeah.
and the teacher's with them, so I think that's why we hear them more so now. But anyway, all right. Well, let's move on. Move out.
There we go.
All right.
Pope
So
Innocent.
yeah, who are we? Pope Innocent.
Which I've always found to be an amusing name.
Yeah. Yeah.
See
Well,
what?
Innocent. What was Urban? Pope Urban. That's another name that's kind
He
of.
lived in the country, dude. You know he did.
Yeah, that was all there was back then. Almost.
What does their car mean?
What is what? Vicar? Well, hold on just a minute. We'll find that out. Okay, so Pope Innocent. This is a classic case of somebody at the right place at the right time. Although he was the wrong person for the right place at the right time. But he comes to power when there's actually a power vacuum that is taking place in the Western world at that time. There are weak kings in leading the various nations, and he steps into that power vacuum. And Innocent III, his reign as Pope becomes a very, very influential one in the medieval era. So anyway, he comes to power. Italy is ruled at this point by a very weak ruler, and he is able to take the properties, the various papal states, and take control over them once and for all. Prior to this, there had been a kind of tug of war between the popes and the rulers who were ruling in Italy. And he comes in and he basically utilizes this power weakness that is going on there. It takes advantage of it and takes control over the papal properties in Italy. He refused to be known as the Vicar of Peter and instead insisted on being known as the Vicar of Christ. Now, let me explain what that means. Basically, vicar is the idea of one who stands in the place of, or one who represents. And that is, up until this point, people had referred to the Pope occasionally as the Vicar of Christ, but they had also referred to him as the Vicar of Peter, that he is standing in the place of Peter. He says, no, Peter's not good enough for Innocent III. Instead, he wants to be known as the Vicar of Christ, the one who stands in the place of Christ. And he would have said that Peter also was the Vicar of Christ. That's why it's not sensible for him to be known as the Vicar of Peter. But the Pope, in his estimation, is one who basically stands in the place of Christ on earth. He is the head of the church because Christ is the head of the church, right? That's what Ephesians 5 tells us anyway. So Christ is the head of the church. Since the Pope is the Vicar of Christ, one who stands in the place of Christ, then the Pope is the head of the church. That, by the way, that belief is still practiced in Rome today. They call their popes the Vicar of Christ. That was solidified by Innocent III.
John 14.
What's that?
The Holy Spirit is the Vicar of Christ.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, it's one of those things that progressively throughout history, the Roman Catholic Church took upon itself titles of the Godhead. Which is
Well, yeah.
kind of a bad thing for the Pope.
Well, for the Pope or for Mary or anybody else. So I mean, they were very close to calling her co-redemptrix. They refer to her as the Mother of God, and in almost adoringly blasphemous overtones. Now, technically, okay, she's the Theotokos. She is the God bearer, right? She bore Christ in her womb. Christ is God, so there you go.
Didn't Theotokos wasn't that more of a term at least originally applied to Christ?
Yeah, that would be the bearer of God.
Which is part of the problem, right? Mary's thinking, hold on, wait a minute.
Which might be where the jump is made.
Anyway,
Well, no,
I've been told to stop interrupting you because you have a lot to get to.
That's okay. We're just going to get to where we get, and we'll just call it a day at that. But it's all good. It's good to get a little bit more in depth in what we actually get to. I've never been in a history class in my life where they finished the book, ever.
That's fair.
I don't intend to be that guy either.
Yeah, that's happened, right? Yeah.
So we'll just roll it over to the next one. Roll it over to the next one. He established the doctrine of penitudo
Potestasis?
Thank you. Potestasis.
That's a guess.
You're probably right. So the fullness of power. The fullness of power. The Pope, as the vicar of Christ, possesses supreme authority over all matters spiritual and civil. So here's where he begins to blur the distinction between civil ruler and ecclesiastical ruler. He's not satisfied being called the vicar of Christ. Now, if Jesus were on the earth, he would be both. And perhaps I should say, when he comes to earth, he will be both. But here Innocent is taking this sort of spheres of authority, putting a foot in either one of them. This, of course, is going to lead to a lot of problems, politically speaking and religiously speaking as well. But he believes that all matters, spiritual and civil, he has something to say, and everybody ought to listen. You're shaking your head. Go ahead. What?
I was thinking, I just forget about humility and everything, but I was reading the quote that you have on there. It might be a typo.
Oh, yeah.
But either way, it's
Yeah.
like, wow, I am the vicar of Christ. Everyone should obey me as they bow the knee to Christ. They should bow the knee to me. He's like, wow. I don't think they drew his head large enough in the picture. Maybe.
I know, right?
Oh, my.
Yeah. So this is a quote that from his doctrine there, the writing where he established that. He says, "The Lord Jesus Christ established one sovereign, should be one sovereign. Okay. Yeah, established one sovereign over all as his universal vicar." Who's that? Innocent. Whom all things, there should be an S there. Man, I messed that up. All things in heaven, earth, and hell should obey, even as they bow the knee to Christ. So he believes himself to be that one sovereign ruler. He's the universal vicar. He's over all powers of heaven, earth, and hell. Man,
What a claim.
Yeah, he got in for a rude awakening when he died.
Got a little bit of 3 CV going on here.
Well, there's that, yes. And a 1 and 2 in all likelihood.
Add a few more.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Innocent flexes his political authority to the rulers of his day. And this is where I said that he steps into this sort of weak-willed power vacuum. There's a lot to be said about that, I think, because weak rulers create power vacuums. Weak rulers who are ineffectual at making decisions, ineffectual at executing their plans, and this sort of thing. Weak rulers create this power vacuum, and that allows wicked men, ambitious wicked men, to step into that power vacuum and assume control. And this is exactly what happens with Pope Innocent. Yes, I refer to Pope Innocent as a wicked man. He clearly is, because he's trying to take for himself power that God has not granted him. And no elder, no presbyteros, which is what he actually is supposed to be. No bishop, no elder, no pastor in God's church should presume for himself these terms.
His
Right.
pope name is very, very nice.
Well, yeah. So he takes advantage of a situation like this. So, for example, the Holy Roman Empire. The empire was suffering under rival claimants to the throne. There were several guys who were claiming that they had a right to rule the Holy Roman Empire. And as they were fighting amongst one another, one of them came to Innocent asking for help. I believe his name was Otto, if I'm not mistaken. But anyhow, Innocent takes the opportunity to seize the territory for the papacy, and he says, "Look, I'll give you my backing if you give me the papal states." And so we have Vatican City to this day. So, and I don't know how many other ones they own now, but they seized several what they call papal states, and they were basically given to him and whoever follows in the papal office after that. England, he he deposed the king's candidate for archbishop and installed his own instead. Now this is where the king of obviously the Anglican Church had not yet been founded.
That's
That's going to be a few hundred years later. So several hundred years later, but so the Anglican Church had not been founded, so they were still under the the influence there. Well, he deposed the king's candidate. The king has his guy, and the Pope has his guy. When the king retaliated, he excommunicated the king, and eventually the king ceded his entire kingdom to Innocent III, because Innocent excommunicates him and does not allow any of the churches in England to give communion to any of the people in England, and so he makes that political play, and eventually it's to the point where the king comes basically crawling to Innocent and begging him to take control, take authority.
Do you know who the king was?
I don't remember his name right off the top of my head. I'd have to look back in the book.
You can guess Henry.
Huh?
You can guess Henry.
Yeah, probably. It may have been Henry, but I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at that. There are a lot of
Charles.
There's George too. And then you're taking notes. I forgot. Okay. Well, I can look that up. Who is the king? King of England under Henry or under Innocent III? Hello, come on in, sir. It was King John. Yep. There's a few Johns in there too. King John. Yep. Yeah, and evidently it made, well, like I said, he basically cedes his authority to Innocent and becomes his vassal at that point. And with his loyalty given to Innocent III.
Is that the John after Richard? During the
It would have been, well, he would have been after the Richard, and it would have been John.
Richard, it says Richard Lionheart. They had two kings during the papacy.
Well, so what happened? That is during the Crusades, yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was Richard the Lionheart, who was the actual king, he was the elder. He was busy killing Muslims in the Middle East. So John would have been ruling back there, and John was a very weak ruler. So contrary to Robin Hood lore, Lionheart did not make it back from the Crusades. He died in France. Did not make it back from the Crusades.
Said he died in 1199.
Who? Lionheart?
Yeah,
Richard?
Lionheart.
Yeah. So John did take the throne for a while, and I believe that's the same King John that was. Let me see here. Oh no. Yeah, it would have been him. In 1215, that was the same King John who was forced to sign the Magna Carta. So yeah, that all happened. And of course, if you know the story behind that, King John was such a wicked ruler that the nobles of England got together and said enough is enough, and they made him sign the Magna Carta, which, among other things, essentially what it does is it tells the king that you're under the law too. You have to obey the law. And so that becomes sort of a basis for Protestant resistance theory as we head into the Reformation. But then once the nobles all went home, King John started attacking them one by one to assert his authority or whatever. He was a terribly wicked man. But he was, and again, he was a weak ruler. I don't know what Richard would have been like if had he lived. That would have been interesting to see. But anyway, so that's how Innocent deals with John. Basically, makes him come crawling. And then France, we see this sort of thing happening not only here, but it's going to happen in England a few hundred years later as well. But the King of France decides he doesn't like his wife. And so he puts her in a nunnery. He makes her a nun. And he takes another woman to be his wife. And at that point, Innocent III's like, and puts the entire nation of France under the interdict of no communion. And eventually has the king divorce his second wife and then restore his initial wife. All three of these, the King of England, the King of France, the King of the Holy Roman Empire, are submitted now to the Pope. And that is perhaps one of the most poignant displays of papal authority. In the history of the popes, it could be arguable that is the case. The popes nowadays, the Pope, might complain about you shouldn't build that wall, or you shouldn't have abortions or whatever. But you never see the popes nowadays pulling this sort of power trip, I guess.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Yeah, he has a hard enough time pulling this kind of authority with his own church nowadays. So we'll see. But anyway, he calls the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. Do what?
That's very important.
The Fourth Lateran Council defines the Church's doctrine of transubstantiation. 1215. Not with Jesus in 33, but with the Fourth Lateran Council of 1215. The council gives definition to the doctrine of transubstantiation. It condemns the teachings of several dissenting religious movements, including the Waldensians, which we'll talk a little bit about them. There were others as well that were very heretical. The Waldensians were odd, to say the least, but they may have been orthodox in their beliefs. But there were others as well that were condemned. But the Waldensians they're worth mentioning because they have some doctrine, as we'll see in a moment when we look at them. They have some doctrines that are very much formative of what we're going to see a little bit later on in a few hundred years with the onset of the Protestant Reformation. For example, they look to the scriptures as their authority, as opposed to the popes and this sort of thing. But we'll look at them in just a moment. Let me know when you're done there. So what is the doctrine of transubstantiation? We talked about it already, but do you remember what it was? the
Yeah.
idea.
Wasn't that the belief that Thomas Aquinas came up with kind of the intellectual argument to explain how that the Eucharist and wine was actually transformed into the body
Yeah,
and blood of
yeah.
Christ?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That, like you said, Aquinas came up with the intellectual justification of it. The idea of transubstantiation goes back a little bit further than that. But yeah, he's the one that gave it intellectual teeth, so to speak. It's kind of like the theory of evolution, right? The theory of evolution goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. The problem with science up until the 19th century was that they could never really figure out a way in some sort of, they could never even imagine a mechanism that drove it. Why does evolution happen? And that's what Darwin did with his evolution by means of natural selection. Of course, upon further examination, natural selection actually works against evolution, not for it. But anyway, he arrived on the scene at the appointed time where it was a perfect storm and it took off. So, and people have been duped by that even today. You'll get PhDs who, after you demonstrate for them that natural selection actually weans out genetic variability, that will still say that it drives evolution. It's actually categorically impossible for it to. So same thing here. You've got transubstantiation as a doctrine a lot earlier than Thomas Aquinas. But Thomas Aquinas comes along and he gives them some intellectual rigor to undergird their doctrine of transubstantiation to explain why and how. And then they take it from there. All right, so it also instituted anti-Jewish legal regulations. Now, when you say the word Jew, you get in some trouble. Because when you say the word Jew, are you talking about? I mean, there's the ethnic Judaism. Not. So there's ethnic Jews. There are religious Jews. And today, perhaps not so much then, but today there are national Jews, Israelis. So whenever somebody, and then you've also got the classical way that the word Jew itself refers to a member of the tribe of Judah. So when you say the word Jew, what are you talking about? This is where people have arguments in each other's faces,
Happy equivocation.
and they're just talking right past each other.
I have yet, in almost any conversation I have with anybody online regarding that particular term these days, there's always been equivocation.
Oh yeah,
Every time.
yeah. It's like stop it.
Exactly. Please stop it. You equivocate, your argument is over.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm trying to remember somewhere up north, one of the kings asked the different religions, the Christians, the Jews, and the Islamics to come in and present their case for their best religion, I think.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was two different instances of this, and there was so much debauchery going on that
They wanted to solidify under that one religion.
people were, more or less encouraged to select one. And a lot of the people selected Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, some later kind of categorically considered Jews, but I was wondering, were they really?
Because they practiced Judaism, but they were not
Yeah.
ethnically Jews.
Right, that's what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Were they really
Well, that depends on what you mean, because I think that, for example, in the first century, if you have a non-ethnic Jew who practices Judaism, they would have called that a God-fearing Gentile, not or a convert to Judaism, but they wouldn't have considered him necessarily a Jew. However, if you go back in Exodus, you've got in the Exodus, you've got the 12 tribes who are coming out of Egypt, but you also have a mass of other people who are not ethnically Jewish, but but they're coming right along with the ethnically Jewish people, presumably following the same God, following Yahweh. So that it's not as if there's no way to join into the family, so to speak. Well, there are people even today who ask, and this is a big claim from some today, who would say that the people who inhabit Israel right now are not actually ethnically Jewish, that they are, or that they're half breeds or something to that effect. Of course, there's so much, and there are all kinds of arguments either way. I've not taken time to study the history of it, but that's one of the claims that is often made. So, what does it mean to be ethnically Jew? I think only God could sort us all out. Did you have a question there?
No, I just looking at, what's the difference between ethnic and religious?
Well, the religion, Judaism is a religion. You can be a Gentile and follow Judaism. And
An ethnic Jew would have to have actual
Father
descendancy, a father
Yeah.
Abraham, Abraham, Isaac, and
Genetics.
Jacob.
Okay, yeah.
genetics,
And
yeah.
being the
Yeah.
bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and ethnicity does kind of encompass culture as well, but there's also genetically, or that's what I'm referring to when we talk about ethnic Judaism. But the persecution here, though, in this particular situation with the Fourth Lateran Council here, is not based on the ethnic identity of the people. It's based on their religion. In other words, it's saying that Judaism is a damnable heresy because they have rejected their Savior. I would agree with that. Now, I wouldn't say let's go kill them and seize their land. No. That does not necessarily follow. I would say let's go share the gospel with them, and hopefully they will profess faith in their Messiah and believe on Christ. That's what we should do. But some of the things that the Fourth Lateran Council called on them to do was to segregate. So they had their Jewish ghettos, and then also to wear specific clothing. Does that sound familiar? Like the more things change, the more they stay the same. But that's what the Fourth Lateran Council compelled them to do. And yes, this is hundreds of years prior to Adolf Hitler and the Nazi persecution of the Jews.
And the ethnic or religious or whatever, they didn't have a leader like the Pope is of the Catholic Church, or the Pope was in charge of all those religious
Yeah.
practices. So
The Jews would not have had a leader like that. No,
they wouldn't to fight that.
no. The high priesthood essentially ended with was it Bar Koba's revolt in 140 something AD. I think that's when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD.
Right.
So I guess it was after that. Bar Koba was the they were part of that whole resurrected Judaism. So what happens is after 70 AD, you have a few surviving members of the Pharisee sect who take everything that they can away from Jerusalem, and then they basically reinvent Judaism at that point. So the Judaism that's practiced today is not the Judaism of the Bible, and that's why we can safely say that is a heresy, that it is a damnable heresy. Because the fulfillment of Old Testament Judaism is Christianity. That is, we could say Old Testament Christianity, really.
Sure. Well, I was just going to say that's why I like referring to the religion of the Old Testament as proto-Christianity.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
what did Jesus say in John 8? Abraham saw my day and was glad.
Absolutely.
You're not like your father Abraham.
Yeah, you're your father, the devil. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they didn't like that a whole lot. But no, that's people think that Judaism goes all the way back. No, it doesn't. It goes back to 70 A.D. And there was a rabbi, was it Stephen or something like that? I don't remember his name, but that sounds familiar. But he and a number of Pharisees evacuated the city, and then Bar Kokhba came along. He was a popular political sort of guy. Some people thought that he was the Messiah, and that was in the I think 140s AD or something like that. So it's 60, 70 years later, and that's when Rome came in and just totally evacuated the Jews. Killed all of them. They didn't kill. They evacuated, and they renamed it Palestine at that time. Because Palestine is a Latin word that means Philistine, because Philistines had lived in that area at some point. So that's why they call it Palestine. And that's why you see Palestine today, the Palestinian people, hovering around Gaza and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That's where the Philistines inhabited back then. So that's
The Israelites never chased them out, so they were just there.
yeah, exactly. Well, we talked about that in Sunday school a little bit.
Still haven't gotten enough.
So anyway, yeah, he's teaching them more. So every generation, I guess. All right. He formed the precursor for the Inquisition. Of course, he would. The precursor. So the Inquisition was an effort to stamp out heresy in the church. And the Inquisition lasts into the Renaissance and the Reformation era and this sort of thing. But he had in his day a number of dissenting groups, and the reason I think that this is the case is because Rome has been, for the last several hundred years, by this time, has been multiplying erroneous doctrines. And with every erroneous doctrine that they accrue to themselves, they're going to push off a group of people who dissent from that erroneous doctrine. And they're going to condemn them, and that group is going to go out, and what's that group going to do? Just disappear? No, they're going to go form up and worship and according to what they believe to be true. And so there are various groups that are forming on the peripheral of the Roman Catholic Church at this time. And here, innocents having to deal with all these. So it's the hardliner that's causing all this division, and then these little groups are kind of splintering off. And so he has to deal with them. So he starts a group of legates or a group of people that are answerable not to the local bishop, whoever that may be, but to him alone. So he's got his own little army now, known as the Inquisition. Again, predating the brown shirts. A lot of similarities here, huh? But and what they do is they go out and they investigate whatever claims of heresy that there is. And they will go in there, they'll investigate, and if the Inquisition decides that you're a heretic, you're in trouble. Now, it's not considered the Inquisition at this time. This is sort of just the precursor of it. He's got a group of people that are going out and investigating these charges of heresy and so on. But these legates, these soldiers, if you will, they're not actually soldiers. They're preachers, so to speak, or they're bishops or something, some kind of spies, essentially. Yeah. They go out. They're accountable to him. They don't have to answer to the local bishop. The local bishop was in charge of the church there, right, in that local area. But these guys were independent of his authority. It'd be kind of like the federal government sending the marshals in, and that kind of thing. They don't have to answer to the local bishop. So they're busy seeking out heretics at this time, and that is going to evolve into the Inquisition. And the Inquisition is going to be a terrible, terrible thing in just a short while. So yeah. Did you raise your hand for a question, or
No,
you just stretched? Okay.
Were there a list of the different groups that were on the particular targeting?
Well, I'm going to name at least one of them. There are several of them that are mentioned in the book there. I want to talk about at least one of them. And then there's some that probably we don't even know about or that are so small. But yeah, we'll talk about them shortly. The Waldensians are the ones I want to look at because the Waldensians are going to be, they're going to be kind of a precursor to or formative of the thoughts of people like Wycliffe and John Huss and those guys. Saint Francis. Now, I get bills from this guy. No, I'm just kidding. So, the Saint Francis, talk about poverty, man. I paid you a lot of money. I'm just kidding. Saint Francis of Assisi. He's a monk. There's his years there, but he grows up and he has, as a young man, he has sort of ecstatic visions. Now, ecstatic visions means visions of ecstasy. In other words, these are visions of heaven or visions of this kind of thing. And his visions in particular had a lot to do with with Mary actually. But he leaves his family. Now he's not married, but he's young and he's in his dad's household. And his dad has other plans for him. And he's like, Dad, I want to become a preacher. So he goes and he leaves his family because he doesn't want interference from them. And he leaves them in order to become a preacher. Now, the problem here, though, is that in the church, in the Catholic Church, in order to be a preacher, you have to have permission to do that from the Pope or from a local bishop or something of that nature. So you have to be answerable to somebody. That's kind of what we do with our street preaching ministry. If somebody's going to use our microphone, it's going to be somebody that we know and we have authorized to use it because otherwise it's our microphone. You can't have it. So there are very few people that we allow on that. But anyway, he leaves his family to become a preacher. He personally emphasizes poverty and a simplicity of faith. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air in the middle of all of this civil power grab that is going on in the church in his day. He emphasizes a simple approach to life, simple poverty, and so forth, simplicity of faith. This is his icon, and if you remember earlier on in this class, we talked about what icons are. But this is what his icon looks like, and there are things in his icon that are symbolic of him, representative of who he is. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But yeah, that is Saint Francis. He founded the Franciscans. And the Franciscans is a holy order authorized by the Catholic Church, and they are a monastic order. In fact, they're what they call a mendicant order. They're also known as the Grey Friars. But the mendicants, are you familiar with that term, mendicant? This is basically, these are monks that have taken a vow of poverty. And you say, well, what's big about that? Don't all priests take a vow of poverty? You say no, they don't. I don't know. Maybe they don't. But the Franciscans, though, also in addition to this vow of poverty, they essentially go around begging for whatever money that they get. Now you might think, well, that's kind of lame, that they go around begging. That's what a mendicant is someone who goes around begging for his livelihood. Well, the difference is that yes, they do beg to get food for themselves so they can eat, but they also beg for providing things for others, for helping the poor. So it's not that they're just begging for themselves. They're not these guys standing on the street corner, we'll work for food, but I don't really want to work, and I don't really want food. I just want money. The Franciscans beg for money, but they take the money and while they will spend some money on themselves, most of the time they're giving that money to other people who are impoverished. At least that's how it started. That's never how it stays, but that's how it started. So he meets and receives the support of Innocent III, and thus saves his entire order from being killed. So because now he's received authority from Innocent III to preach. And so he goes about preaching, which is rather interesting because I can't think of two guys who would be so different from one another. St. Francis, for his bad theology and all, was a pretty humble guy, Anyway, he starts this religious order up, and there spawns off of it a women Franciscan order. That is from St. Clair of Assisi. They're known as the Poor Clares because they, again, are a mendicant group. And we have a mendicant church right down the road called St. Francis St. Clair that is a very nice building. But yeah, that is named after them anyway. So that spawns the women's monastic order in the Franciscan flavor, if you will.
Were some of the priests married back then, or when did the?
No, not by this time. Not legitimately. No, not in the Roman Catholic Church. That was a much earlier innovation. I don't remember the Pope who said that or who declared that, but that was earlier on. So no, Saint Clair and Saint Francis were not a thing. They kept separate. They kept them separate. But that never developed in the Eastern Church, but it developed in the Western Church because the Eastern priests can be married. And there are some Catholics, although the group is small, I believe, there are some Catholics who practice a wedded clergy. I know of a guy, his name is Rob. I don't know his last name. They call him Father Rob. He's he's the guy that heads up the things over at Eskenazi Hospital. So I used to see him every year when he would have this up until 2020. She would have these banquets we had to go to every year, which was entertaining because you get to meet people like Father Rob, who's a Catholic, has no problem with abortion. I think he might personally have a problem with it. But anyway, he also has a wife and children.
Sure, it's not a Episcopalian.
No, he's Catholic. He's a Roman Catholic.
I've never heard of that.
It's a small group. That's what I thought when I heard it. I was like, well, he must be a heretical order or something like that. But there's a group in the Catholic Church that has clergy that can be married. What were you saying? Go ahead.
Some of the apostles were married, weren't they?
Oh, well, yeah, Peter was married.
Yeah.
The first pope was married. Come on, guys, get with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say something to that? Or?
Oh, I was just saying that there's a way that you can actually donate to them now electronically online, and then Kroger has partnered with it. If you do so, they'll give you a free coupon for donuts.
Who?
Donate to the Eclairs downtown.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they call it the Eclairs. Eclairs.
Yeah. It's a different spelling, but that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I like it. All right. Oh, let's see. Are you done? Okay, cool. Okay, so now the interesting thing, and this happens while Francis is still part of the Franciscan order. Yes, he's going to leave, but Francis is still part of the Franciscan order, and he writes what's called the rule. And if you remember back when we talked about monastic orders, all the monastic orders have a rule that they operate by. In something that was novel to his, or new, or significant in his, was that he did give the ability for the monk to exercise his own individual conscience in certain matters. That usually was not a thing. You do what the abbey tells you to do, and don't question, right? But Francis did allow for the exercise of individual conscience in certain areas. You don't want too much of that. You get a little bit of individual conscience in there, and you might end up with a Protestant Reformation.
Dad, what is novel?
Novel means new or unprecedented. Something that's new, something that is different than the rest. So that's what was different about his.
And this is not the book that you would read. This is a concept.
Yeah. They used to call novels. The reason they got their name is because there was a new book every other day or whatever, and they start calling them novels. Do what?
So the terms are related. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're kind of related, but yeah, they're. This is the adjectival version.
Yeah.
So, before long, the Franciscan movement becomes too large for Francis to manage. It's weird, isn't it? Hey, I want to be poor. I want to beg for a living. And some people just need structure. They need a system within which to operate. And once they have that, they feel safe and they can move on. Well, it began to change in ways that Francis did not approve of, so he resigns. Francis abandoned his Franciscan order. So whatever the Franciscan order is nowadays, it's not what Francis started. So
Was there something in particular that he disapproved of? Or?
Well, just like I said, it became too big for him to manage. Other people started managing different sections of it, and a lot of what was being done with this whole individual conscience thing,
Exercise.
yeah, was not to his liking, and it was several different things, and it would have been different with other, with just different various groups. And he realized that the institution had sort of taken over, if that makes sense, and it was not what he wanted to do. So he steps out, he steps away from it. Now, I mentioned his icon a little bit earlier. If you look at his icon, you see the dove there, and the dove is usually representative of, number one, the Holy Spirit. Number two, peace, right? So the dove represents peace. Do you see anything else interesting about his icon? He has bandages on his hands. Yeah, he's got bandages on his hands, and you notice that there's a little mark there and a little mark there. Yes, because Francis was the first recorded saint to have experienced the stigmata. Stigmata, if you've not heard of that term,
Signs of the cross, right?
yeah. Stigmata is supposedly a phenomenon whereby the person who's experiencing it experiences the wounds of Christ in some way, shape, or form. And it can sometimes be bleeding from the hands and the feet, or bleeding from the side, bleeding from the head, and that's the sign of the cross. I bear the marks of the cross. I bear the marks of Christ in my flesh, says Paul. And there are several people who argue that Paul also experienced the stigmata because of that, because of what he said. I bear on my body the marks of Christ.
I've heard, this may be about left field, that when Christ was crucified, he was crucified to his wrists.
Mhm.
The stigmata is in the hand.
Yeah, so I don't put a whole lot of stock in stigmata.
I'm just
Personally,
wondering, yeah.
The way that the Romans would have typically crucified. Now, obviously, we don't have irrefutable proof of that, but just the way that they generally would have crucified somebody that they were nailing to the cross, because they would tie people to the cross as well.
Right.
But for the people that they were nailing to the cross, they would have nailed it between their radius and ulna right here, because if you put it through here, it's going to rip out. Their weight's going to rip it out. But if you put it between the radius and the ulna, it hits a nerve there and causes contraction, a compulsive contraction of those muscles, and they would have held themselves to the cross. That would have been extraordinarily painful. So, but that's why they did that. The Romans were pretty good at making sure that they caused pain
And kill people.
I mean, if once you get the guy out there, if his hands rip out and he falls down on the ground, you got to put him back up there. That's just a lot more work, So
I mean, I just heard that. So you
Yeah.
think that's how they did it? I mean, that's the way they used to do it. So that's how they.
that's what I understand. Yes. Although I wouldn't make it a
It's
doctrine,
not written.
so because this was considered part of the hand, and the Romans when they shook hands shook like that. They grasped forearms. So yeah, that was part of the hand. They're considered part of the hand by the Romans.
But they didn't know that back then, so the pictures are that way.
Yeah, they must have missed that. So yeah.
Do a lot for the veracity of your stigmata claims, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, details. Like I said, though, we don't know for sure. But whatever the stigmata claims are, number one, and I don't know. I don't know what they are, honestly. It could be a physiological response to somebody's delusion. It could be somebody harming themselves to you know,
Suffer that.
to do that. And I'm sure there have been people who have done that and faked it. And there are crazy people who will fake that sort of thing. There are people today who will have themselves crucified on Easter or on Good Friday. And they will, like, literally nails through the hands and everything. But yeah, that's, to me, crazy. But whatever. That doesn't prove your devotion to Christ, okay? that proves you're crazy. You need to be in an asylum and get therapy.
Well, I know with St. Francis of Assisi, we were always taught that he was patron saint of animals, and we never got to that stigmata part.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah, he was patron saint of
Of
animals.
animals, huh? I thought that was Barnabas.
Yeah, it's St. Francis of Assisi. You always see him with squirrels.
With
and
some
birds
kind of
around
animals.
him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm not up on my saints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a biggie. That's one that was taught a lot.
I just
Not
remember when I
butchered.
worked at the landscaping place, we sold little statues of these guys because the guy I worked for was Roman Catholic, and they would have these concrete statues, and I'd have to carry those suckers out. They were heavy. I never knew what they were. Well, like I knew that they were saints, but I didn't know like who's this guy or that guy or whatever. Yeah. Well, the next group that we're going to look at, well, that was the Franciscans. And now of the Catholic Church, there are other groups as well. The Dominicans become a group during this time, and we already have the Jesuits, the Augustinians. So there are different monastic orders within the Catholic Church. The Franciscans tend to be one of the more novel ones who come along during this time. Now we have the Waldensians, founded by Valdez, later given the name Peter Waldo. I think I would have had Valdez. That sounds a lot cooler. Hi, my name is Waldo.
He was a hard man to find.
He was, yeah. He never could discover where he was at, even though he's wearing this red and white shirt. Let's see. But Peter Waldo, founded by a guy named Valdez. They really should have made the painting with like red and white stripes. That would be great. Or a hat, you know. Never mind.
He's
Alright.
wearing a dress.
It's not a dress, it's a robe.
Looks like a dress.
Okay, that's fair. Robes look like dresses, so. He was impressed by Christ's command to the rich young ruler, so he sells everything he has and commits himself to poverty. And he goes around preaching, and he gathers a large body of people to himself. People who listen to him preaching. But what did we find out about preaching? Preaching is illegal without the stamp of approval of the church. So whether it's the Pope or whether excuse me. Well, my voice is gone. Maybe I'll come back here and say, do what?
You did Sunday school. Now you're
Give him
gonna
the top.
die.
Yeah, well, that's what I normally do.
It's
All right. Just got a little bit of saliva in my
Maybe not
vocal
supposed to talk
cords.
about Waldo.
Doesn't want to come out. Do what?
Maybe you're not supposed to talk about him.
Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about Waldo here. Maybe I'd be blasphemous toward Waldo. So, anyway, okay, let's move on. I think we're good now. Excuse me. He was excommunicated because he did not have permission to preach. He is kicked out of the church, and unlike St. Francis, who also preached, St. Francis had it cleared with the Pope. But evidently, there are some sort of crossovers here, right? So both the Franciscans and the Waldensians both are people who believe in the virtue of poverty. They believe in, and there may be something to that, don't you think? If we divest ourselves from the trappings of the world, it allows us to be a little bit more, minded toward the things of heaven. And that's what they were. But they have that crossover, but there are definitely things that they would not agree on. All the Waldensians were excommunicated in 1184. They were branded a heretical sect.
Just because of their preaching without permission. Were they
Well,
heretical?
it's also, and the reason they didn't have permission is because of some of the things that they were preaching about.
I was gonna say, were they heretical?
Well, according to the Catholic Church, because they were
Oh.
definitely preaching. Well, then again, so was Martin Luther
True.
and John Calvin and a whole bunch of others. Ulrich Zwingli. So some of their beliefs. Well, the first one, and I think we would find common ground here. The first belief that they had was the Bible is the supreme rule of Christian belief and practice. Now, the Catholic Church believes, or will say that they believe in the Bible as well, but the Bible is only one part of what they call their magisterium, right? There are various authorities for their belief and practice. So they have the Bible, they have the traditions of the apostles that they appeal to, which I guess are orally handed down. They have the church councils. They have whenever the Pope speaks ex cathedra, and so forth. So they've got these various competing forms of authority within the Roman Catholic Church. They will make appeals to the fathers, the church fathers as well, and that sort of thing. Of course, a lot of that would be sort of the quote-unquote unspoken tradition, or they would call it that. They rejected papal infallibility, transubstantiation, purgatory, prayers to the dead, and indulgences. But other than that, they're perfectly good Catholics. Do you see now why they weren't given permission to preach?
Rejected papal infallibility.
What's papal infallibility?
Infallibility means cannot fail. When something is fallible, that means it's able to fail. And papal infallibility means that whenever the Pope is speaking in a certain way, or whenever he makes a certain declaration, that he cannot fail, that what he says is Scripture, essentially. So basically, they're no friends of Innocent III, who likes to think of himself as Christ's vicar. They are, he did not care for this group at all. And I mean, let's face it, if you don't believe in purgatory, then you can't sell indulgences to get people out of purgatory. And how are we going to fund our cathedrals if we can't sell indulgences to get people out of purgatory? Yes, I know that's a logical fallacy. Intentionally so. So that is, those are the Waldensians. Now they studied the Bible in translations in their native languages. That's a problem. Because up until now, this blows my mind. Up until this point, the Roman Catholic Church had studied the Latin Vulgate. The Latin Vulgate we saw last semester, last time we were studying church history, was translated by Jerome very early on. Jerome, he's in the 5th century or so, it's contemporary with St. Augustine. And Jerome translates directly from the Hebrew and from the Greek into Latin. Okay, that's great. Why did Jerome translate from the Greek and the Hebrew into Latin?
Lingua franca.
Yeah, he took it west, and that's what everybody was speaking out there. So it was a very good way for them to learn. It was a very good way for them to learn the scriptures, because they didn't know Greek and nobody knew Hebrew, and so that's what he did. But by this time, so here we are 500-600 years later. By this time, you've got the Roman Catholic Church still having everything done in Latin, but by and large, the people are illiterate in Latin. The only people who speak, read, or do anything with Latin are the educated elite. And the Pope and the church doesn't want to authorize translations into the vernacular. Why? Why would they be opposed to that?
Control.
They didn't want people to know what the Bible said exactly.
Exactly. They don't want people to know what the Bible actually teaches, because if people know what the Bible actually teaches, then the Pope is going to lose his authority.
You have more.
Then the church is going to lose their authority. Yeah.
And they can't sell indulgences to make money.
Yeah, they can't sell indulgences to make money. That's part of that whole control.
These guys were the precursors to Reformation.
Yeah.
Some of them.
So some of the doctrines, yes.
Many of their doctrines are right in line with the Reformation.
With some of the basic tenets, absolutely. And so the Waldensians are going to, they're still around actually, but there's
Some of these would have been on Martin Luther's 92 Theses.
yeah,
Or however many.
95. Yeah, well, certainly Luther was against the sale of indulgences. And a lot of his arguments were that the Waldensians would have been like, yeah, get him, But the funny thing about that is Luther, when he wrote those, he was not intending to found another church. He wasn't intending to do anything like that. He really wasn't even totally at that point anyway opposed to the sale of indulgences. He just thought that they were being abused and wanted reform in the church. But when he posted those things for basically a debate, he wanted to have a debate, and somebody got a hold of him, and Gutenberg had invented his press just a little bit earlier, and they started printing them and publishing them, and again, perfect storm, providential perfect storm. God brings all these things together, and one thing leads to another. All of a sudden, we have a Lutheran church. But yeah, but that's next year's study, Lord willing. We'll see. Oh, that's good. We're gonna have to start that like in August, I think.
Luther came up with his statements independent of these, because he
Yes.
wasn't aware of them.
Yes, he would have come up with them independent. But then the crazy thing about that is that you've got different people all over the Western world at this time, in the what we're calling the Eastern world here too, who are reaching the same conclusion at the same time. You've got Ulrich Zwingli in Switzerland. You've got Luther in Germany, and others as well. William Tyndale comes along with an English translation just a couple of years after Luther does. And so all of this is happening independently of one another, and they're hearing about each other, but they're not all polyglots. They're not reading each other's works, so to speak.
They're not emailing.
Yeah, they're not doing that. It's not a coordinated effort,
Right.
except it's coordinated by the Holy Spirit. So yes.
I have some books that are published by Tyndale.
Tyndale House Publishing. Yeah, that's a publishing house named after William Tyndale. He was burned at the stake. Yeah. Sorry, I had to get my martyrs straight there for a second.
Is he the unhappy looking guy that was on the back?
No, that was John Huss. The guy that was on fire.
Imagine you might look pretty unhappy if you're being burned.
Yeah, I would be unhappy. I mean, you never know though, because it was what's his name? Polycarp was happy to get burned. He was happy to go to the flames.
Well, that's not the same as being happy while you're being
No, this is true. This is true. All right, so we've got so they're studying the Bible and translations, and interestingly enough, they're more literate than the average population because they want to study the Bible. And that's really what this does. That's what when you translate the Bible, when we see it translated into the vernacular of the people, it does a lot of things. Number one, it gives it an authority by which the reigning institutional authority can be challenged. One of the biggest issues with the woke movement trying to challenge institutional authority, they have no moral authority on which to stand. They want to talk about injustice, but they can't even define justice. They can't even define what a woman is. So how are they going to have a leg to stand on? Their claim is absolutely vacuous. when it comes to trying to be any sort of agent for positive change. They're always going to lead only to corruption. Of course, that's what we're seeing in every one of the groups, whether it be the feminist groups or the Black Lives Matter groups or the whatever. All it is it degenerates to violence and feeling, and and that kind of thing. So anyway, I digress. Yeah, exactly. Useful idiots. Did I turn it off? Yeah, I did. They're persecuted violently, especially after the Inquisition gets up and running, and they're systematically exterminated, but they are not completely exterminated. They are hunted down and killed and everything because there are Waldensian churches that remain in Europe today. I think they number only about 45,000 individuals or so. But they're still around.
Any place special in Europe, just over.
I don't remember right now. I want to say like the Caucasus Mountains, or maybe no, that's not. That's a little far east. I don't know. I know it was a mountainous region, but I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember.
It's the picture. Yeah.
Well, yeah. There's the picture. That picture reminds me of a Mormon painting, though. I don't know why. It's just got the style that you see on all the Mormon tracks.
Bonnet. I'm thinking that's a pretty modern bonnet.
It does look like a modern bonnet. Maybe they're Dutch. I don't know.
And the vest and the guy in the back and their haircuts and stuff.
It reminds me of a like I said, like a Mormon picture. But that was accompanying several articles on the Waldensians. So I don't know, maybe somebody got a hold of a bad picture.
Well, pictures are always pretty historically accurate.
Sure. Who knows what Waldo looks like? We know what he looks like. We found him. Seljuk Turks. Now these guys are not Christian at all. These are they begin as pagan invaders, and they invade Saudi Arabia and in other Muslim-held areas. And interestingly enough, they go to war with the Muslims, and they end up getting converted by the Muslims. They become Muslim. I know, right? What happened there? They become Muslims, and they start rampaging across the Eastern Empire.
Is it just me, or is being Muslim worse
Then what?
than not believing at all? Or is it both?
I don't know. Atheists actually have the record of killing more people than any other ideology in the world in recorded history. So I don't know.
As opposed to paganism, you mean?
Yeah. Now, paganism is sort of the worship of spirits and the worship of like various different gods and that kind of thing.
Like Muslims.
What is that?
Not quite the same.
Paganism is what witchcraft is. So Hermione Granger is a pagan.
But not in their world, because in their world it's actually true.
Yeah, in their world, they're superheroes, basically.
Yeah.
You know.
But they don't live around the world, so.
All right. After conquering Muslim Persia, they convert to Islam. We're going to convert to the religion of our enemy, the people we conquer. You know. They come to Baghdad about 1055, and the caliph who is there in Baghdad actually recognizes the Turkish leader as the Sultan. And so that name sort of sticks, and it's kind of like king or emperor. It's basically their ruler. They're called the Sultan.
It's like they're on a roller coaster going to the wrong
To do what?
of going on to the wrong things.
Yeah. And they become, so you've heard of genies, right? Like Genie and the Lamp sort of thing. That sort of thing.
Aladdin.
Aladdin. Yeah, that would have come out of this particular culture because they sort of they blend Islam with the paganism that they previously had worshipped. So the jinn is what they would call them, which were spirits and so forth. But these are the Seljuk Turks. In 1065, the Turks invade Armenia and then Anatolia. And Anatolia is what we call modern day Turkey today. Notice the name, Turkey, because the Turks essentially take over. Yes? You have a question?
No.
Oh, I thought you were going to say.
No.
Okay. I thought you were going to say something. So they invade and then they essentially take over. Now you've noticed maybe we've rewinded a couple hundred years here and we're going back forward. All of this is going on in the Eastern Empire at the same time that you've got Francis and all of what we've looked at on the Western side, progressing. So the Eastern Empire is in pretty big trouble because the Turks are basically invading. The Muslims have already invaded, the Arabian Muslims and so forth, and they're losing control of their territory very progressively, very quickly. Squeak. Sorry. We've got a lot more to go.
You're not getting writer's cramp here.
Yeah, really. So
I'm
in
not.
1071, this is one of the more decisive battles of history. The Battle of Manzikert. The Byzantines were sent from Constantinople to retake Armenia, and they lose big time. They were met by the Turks at Manzikert and utterly defeated. And this, among other things, sort of shifts the power in that area. The Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, is slowly but surely losing power and being threatened by various invaders who are coming in. By the Turks, by the Arabs, and they're being defeated by them. Then the Turks invade and conquer pretty much all of Asia Minor, which is just right across the channel from Constantinople. So, Constantinople, that's the gem of the Byzantine Empire, capital of the Byzantine Empire. Let's say that you lived in Constantinople and these Turks are right across the channel, taking over everything. What do you do?
Ask for help, pray or something.
Okay, you ask for help. Who do you ask for help?
Somebody you hope will help you.
Okay. Who were
Western
the
Christians,
Yes, ask your separated brethren, if you will.
they weren't very helpful.
No, they were not helpful at all. So ask the Crusaders, ask the Western Christians. Yeah, you guys have your sort of intramural squabbles, but you all believe in Jesus, right? You believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. You've definitely got some issues theologically with each other, but that's who you ask for help. So you do that. But from Manzikert, really, the Byzantines never gained enough momentum to recover their losses. This is a sort of a map of the Seljuk Turk, what they held, and right up here is Constantinople, right there. The rest of this, the Seljuk Turks had invaded. So you've got the Sinai Peninsula on over in here, all the way up to the Fertile Crescent and so forth, and even across, the Fertile Crescent would be over here. But yeah, all over. That's where these were the holdings of the Seljuk Turks.
Dad,
You want to go back and see the sentence that you missed?
Dad, One word.
that the Byzantines never recovered. Got it? Okay, cool. You're not gonna draw this, are you?
No.
Okay,
No,
right.
I pulled
The
it up
maps
on my
in the
phone.
back.
I pulled it up on my phone.
Okay.
It doesn't look like where were the Turks at?
Brown area.
The whole brown area. So
I thought that was Armenia.
there are a lot of places covered here. So you've got Baghdad. You've got I can't read from here. What does that say? That's Mecca, Medina. Okay, Mecca, Medina. This is what they take over. So they're Mecca, Medina, Baghdad. Manzikert is up here. What did you say they were? You said
I was looking at
Armenia.
the Battle of Manzikert, and it didn't look like Armenia had all that territory.
no. Armenia was only a part of that. This is this is all Arab. This is Arab lands here.
Okay.
You've got, we've got Israel right there. You've got the Fertile Crescent, which would have been Iran, Iraq, up in there. What is modern day Iran and Iraq? So Armenia was just one of these places that was very strategic to the area. It was sort of the last straw. Once they get past Armenia, they can get into Asia Minor. Asia Minor is all this up here. That's this
Okay.
area up in here.
I think that's what I'm looking at. Yeah, I am. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Right. So that is, this is by the end of their conquest. This is what they have. this is the land that they own, so to speak, and what their territories are. Now, I want to talk just in terms of major historic events from here, and then I think that'll kind of finish this up. But in 1096 to 1099. Western Catholics, of course, the Byzantines ask for help, and the Western Catholics conduct the First Crusade. They're victorious. They come in and they take back a lot of the land that the Turks had taken away from the Eastern Byzantines. And so, great, it worked. The Crusaders came and helped. So, thank you for helping us cast off the invaders. So we'll have our land back now, please. Oh, that wasn't part of the deal. I've altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it further, right? That's what the Catholics do. They, instead of giving the land back to the Byzantines, the Crusaders decide we like it here. We're going to set up shop, and they take the territory for themselves, and they set up Crusader states, and basically take the territory of the Byzantines. This, by the way, infuriates the Byzantines. I don't know why, but it does. It makes them angry. And this is one of those, a number of continuing acts by the Western Roman Catholics that spur the hatred between the two groups. And it's this hatred or this disdain that they have for one another that actually will lead to the end of the Byzantine Empire, because they refuse to make any concessions toward the Catholics or treat them as anything but a wet doormat or something. I don't know. It's actually the other way around. But in the 1140s, the Muslims come along. 40, 50 years later. 140, 150. No, that's 40 or 50 years later. Sorry, public school math. They come along and reconquer most of the Crusader states. So the Crusaders, after making the Byzantines angry at them, aren't even able to hold their own Crusader states, and they get ejected. In 1176, this is another great word. There's the Battle of Myriokephalon. That's a Greek word. I'm not sure what the Myrio prefix means, but kephale is head, but whatever. It's the Battle of Myriokephalon. This is where Muslims regained power over the entire Asia Minor at this point. So the Muslims reconquer a lot of the Crusader states. That would have included Israel. That would have included the Holy Land, and then they come here and conquer the rest of Asia Minor. So basically, by 1176, they're back to where they began before the Crusades ever took place, before the First Crusade ever took place. And they're going to hold that territory now, more or less. They are going to be the masters of Asia Minor now. From 1203 to 1204, Western Catholics embarked on the Fourth Crusade. Now, you remember the Fourth Crusade, right? We talked a little bit about the Fourth Crusade. This is the crusade where the French alone, they want to go to war. They want to go to a crusade. And so but they can't get there because they don't have the boats to do it. So they contract with the Venetians to go there. And the Venetians are like, yeah, we'll take your army to where it needs to go. But before we get there, we need you to do us a favor as part of the payment for transportation. We need you to go and take this little city for us. This little city is Zara. It's a city in Dalmatia. And it is a Christian city.
Is that where Dalmatians come from?
I don't know.
Yes.
Is it? Well, okay. I guess I had not heard that. But they go to, that's modern day Croatia, I believe. But they go to Zara and they conquer it. It's sort of an easy win for them. But then the Pope excommunicates them all, the French army and the Venetians, for shedding Christian blood. And the French repent, and so he forgives them, but he keeps the Venetians out, like he excommunicated them. But they end up, they were supposed to go to Egypt, and they end up going into into the Eastern Empire, and instead of conquering things in Egypt, they end up going to, they meet while they're in Zara, they meet this deposed Byzantine prince, Alexis Angelus. And he wants the Crusaders to help him regain the throne. And he says that if you help me regain the throne, then we will submit to the Pope, to papal authority. And they're like, oh, okay. So they go not to Egypt, where they originally wanted to go, but they go to Constantinople, which is where his deposed throne is, or where his throne is. They do what the Muslims, the Turks, could never do, and they actually conquer Constantinople. So the Western Crusaders besiege and conquered Constantinople. This is the Catholics conquering the capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. So now the Byzantines have lost most of their holdings to the Muslims. They've lost their capital to the Catholics, and they're in bad shape. And they basically get fractured into three different states, three different groups of the Byzantine states. And they, for the next several decades, or the next, I think it's about 50 years or so, they wage war against both the Turks and the Catholics. So they're again, regressing, getting smaller, getting more localized in various areas. Your pen is mad at you. Is it on fire?
No, it just doesn't want to work.
Oh,
Here,
here.
like another
No, it's
Here's a
fine.
pen.
It's fine. It does it, but it still doesn't.
Here, use this. I'm not using it. It's not orange, but
It's okay.
okay. I heard the audible gasp. So again, the Byzantine population fights back against the Western rulers for the next half a century. In 1261 AD, the Byzantine leader Michael VIII took Constantinople back from the Catholics. So finally, he takes it back. So now the Christians are fighting the Christians, and they're destroying each other. and they're losing the battle because the Turks are just going to sit back and let them fight. And they are the Byzantine Empire is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Michael established this treaty that is known as the Union of Lions or Leons, which basically made Byzantium subservient to Rome. And this was fully rejected by the Byzantine population. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. This is why we just kicked them out of Constantinople. We're not going to be subservient to them. But Michael sees it as politically expedient. He has other pressures pressuring him, and he can't afford to lose papal allegiance or this ally with the papacy. Now Michael is pretty despised by everybody. The Catholics don't like him because he's Byzantine, and the Byzantines don't like him because he's making too many concessions to the Catholics. And so when he dies, his son, who takes over after him, doesn't even give him a funeral, a public funeral, because nobody wants to go, or if they do want to go, they're going to go and heckle it. He in the Union of Lions or Leons. Look at it; it says Lions to me. The Union of Leons is roundly rejected and totally destroyed. It's no longer a thing. Although it does still appear in the Catholic canons, so make of that what you will.
Lyons is a city, right?
Yes. Lyons. It sounds French. I'm not sure if it's French. Was that your best French laugh? Oh. Are you done yet?
This pen isn't fast enough. The other one's thinner.
I see.
So,
It's smoother, is it? So you don't have to write down every word that's on the screen. You can just take notes and summarize what you hear.
I tried the 2 sessions.
What is it?
This is a pen been broke back to me. It's very smooth and it's very interchangeable.
what?
I see.
I know, I'm sorry.
Alrighty. Are you done yet?
Preterist almost or dispensations almost.
I'm in the last sentence almost.
Like that one, did you?
Well, one of them you got a long way to go. The other one
might
could be any moment now. So,
The other one's already done. Well, most of it.
yes, that's true. Sorry, I was thinking post-millennial versus I was thinking preterist.
Well, the two tend to go together.
They do. They do.
Oh,
All right, 1299 AD. Oh, you're not getting a rest, sweetheart. You got more to read. That's right. Keep going.
Ink pens, so I'll be faster.
1299 AD, the Ottoman Empire arises in the northwest. Now, the Ottomans are also Turks, but they're kind of a subsect of Turks, and they make a name for themselves. The Ottoman Empire arises in northwest Turkey, or if you want to call it Anatolia or Asia Minor or whatever, and they quickly subdue much of Asia Minor. The Ottomans become a major power in the area over the next century or so. So the Ottomans arise and they start gaining strength and ascendancy. In 1443, Ottoman forces. This is 100. This is a couple hundred years later after the Catholics do it. But the Ottoman forces surround and conquer Constantinople. They essentially take over the capital of the Byzantine Empire, which had existed ever since the time of Constantine, who we studied last time. But the Ottoman forces surrounded and conquered Constantinople. Do you know what the name? They changed it. They changed the name to what? Yeah, Istanbul,
Yes.
and it remains Istanbul to this day.
There's a song about that.
Okay, I don't know it. So,
Istanbul is Constantinople. Yeah, I've heard it.
No.
You're probably better.
okay.
I know.
So, in the years leading up to the fall of Constantinople, many Eastern scholars flee to the West, and they take with them things like literature, art, theology, history, because they see the Turks coming, and they're like, I'm not a fighting kind of guy. I like to read. I like to,
Rather read and study, stab and shoot.
yeah, I'd rather read and study than stab and shoot. Yeah, that's perfect.
You like shooting.
I love shooting, and I like reading too. So I got a little bit of both. But they don't want to fight. They don't want to die, and so they gather up all of their scholarly works, their mini libraries or their scrolls or whatever they have with them, and they move. Now they're not going to go anywhere in Turkey because, well, the Turks are there, right? And that's the people that they're running away from. So they're going to head, instead of heading east into Turkey, they're going to head west. In what better place to go to in the west, especially if you can travel there by boat? Because let's face it, carrying your library in your cart or your pack is not the most comfortable thing to do.
Or the easiest.
Yeah, so the what's the best place to go to? The best place to go to for the aspiring or established scholar of the Eastern Byzantine Empire is going to be Rome. That's where they all end up going. And it's this sort of migration from Constantinople, which is the capital of the East, to Rome, which is the capital of the West, that brings about an intellectual rebirth in Rome in that day. Now, I have my own theory on all of this. My theory is this, that the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, both of them, became so apostate that God basically destroyed both of them. And out of the ashes of both of them, we see the birth of the Protestant Reformation, the rediscovery of the gospel, and the establishment of the establishment of genuine Christian churches. Now there are several denominations of those, but nonetheless, because of that, the gospel has been rediscovered. When I say rediscovered, let's face it: if your church is inventing doctrines out of whole cloth, and inventing and establishing ways of manipulating people and taking advantage of them so as to enrich yourself and your political authority and your political clout, then yes, God is going to remove your lampstand. And I believe that what we would call the Catholic Church prior to, and of course these things take centuries to accomplish, the Catholic Church, prior to not only Trent, but prior to people like Innocent III, prior to the Lateran Council, prior to the approval of many of these erroneous doctrines, you had a proliferation of genuine Christians in the Roman Catholic Church. And in the Eastern Orthodox Church, there were people who were genuinely saved. But as these churches adopted heretical theologies and began to concretize them into actual dogma, then that church became so apostate that God was not going to use it any longer for those purposes, and destroys them both. The Eastern Orthodox Church today is a shadow of what it once was. The Roman Catholic Church, really, when we see the Protestant Reformation dealing the 1-2 punch that it does in the Roman Catholic Church, it also is a shadow of what it once was. When we consider Pope Innocent III, who is able to strong-arm England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire, which is Germany, Italy, and the various other central states in Europe. He was able to strong-arm those leaders and do what he wanted them to do. The Pope doesn't have that kind of authority anymore. He doesn't. Not the political authority. So God has brought them, has humbled them greatly. All right. Well, anyway, the influx of Eastern learning to the Western world sparks a rebirth of learning. That word rebirth is also known as the Renaissance. I believe that's Italian, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Italian? Okay. Renaissance is Latin for rebirth. Yeah, there you go. Google it. If only we had some way to
I
find
mean,
it.
they're closely tied.
Yeah, sure. It's a Romance language. The Eastern Church had preserved things in Greek. Why is that? Well, because they spoke Greek in the East, and so they had preserved the LXX. Who knows what the LXX is?
Are those Roman numerals?
They are Roman numerals. What does that make in Roman numerals?
So L is 50,
Hmm?
70.
70, yeah. 70. So what is the LXX? What is the 70? The LXX is what's known as the Septuagint. It's abbreviated the LXX, and I will get the spelling wrong on this, I'm sure.
SEUAGINT.
That's what I have in my head. Spell check is always telling me I'm wrong. The Septuagint.
Spell
That's
check doesn't know that word.
yeah. Spell check doesn't know a lot of words I like. So,
Yeah, there you
LXX.
Neither do I.
So the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. The Greek translation of the Old Testament, which was completed, was it in the intertestamental period. So it would have been completed before the beginning of the New Testament. It would have obviously been completed after the close of the Old Testament. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, is the Bible, quote unquote, that Jesus and the apostles most often quote from when you see writings in the New Testament. Very rarely does it go back to the Hebrew or the Aramaic. And sometimes you can kind of look and see that, but most of the time, the quotes we see in the New Testament are quotes from the Septuagint. Yes.
You're saying they were quoting the Greek?
Yes. The Greek, the authors of the New Testament quoted the Greek Septuagint. Yes. Yeah, that's why there's a big debate about which should we be using in our translation. Should we use the Masoretic text of the Hebrew or the Septuagint of the Greek? The interesting thing about that is that Masoretic texts are much newer than the Septuagint copies that we have. But the Masoretic methods of transmission are very accurate. They have been shown to be extraordinarily accurate. So there's a big debate about which one is more reliable as a base text for the Old Testament.
Is the number 70 indicative of books, number of books?
No, it's indicative of
For
there was
translators, I believe.
it was a
That's
theory that 70 elders got together and 70 in over the course of 70 days produced the Septuagint.
Did that include the
There's 70
books,
translators. What's
some other books that are not? in
Yeah,
our-
there are apocrypha that have been included with the Septuagint, but they are not recognized with the canonical books. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand when that the apocrypha, what we call the Old Testament apocrypha, it was never until the Council of Trent, it was never considered canon by anybody. Now, there were people like Jerome, for example, who did translate the apocrypha, but he would put it he would put it onto the side and say, this is deuterocanonical. This is not, that's what the Catholics called it. Sorry, this is apocryphal, which means doubtful. This is not part of the canon. It's useful because it tells you things about history. It tells you things about the culture. It tells you, things about sort of the religious mindset, but it's not the Word of God. The canonical books were specifically set aside as canon. So yes, it was transmitted with it, but they would have had it in a sort of appendix sort of section.
So the apostles read Greek.
Yes, everybody did back then.
What about
Pretty much.
Latin?
Also wrote Greek.
Yeah, the apostles wrote in Greek and read, and they would have read and wrote in Greek. Now they were polyglot; they would have had more than one language. They almost certainly would have spoken Aramaic whenever they were at home.
And Paul spoke Hebrew, as Acts tells us.
Yeah, Paul spoke Hebrew, absolutely,
Anybody
which is a
who
bit
speaks
different than Aramaic. But they would have spoken in the day that would have been the language of the Holy Land, would have been Aramaic. Now, so they would have spoken Aramaic. They would have spoken and or written in Greek because Greek was lingua franca. It was the tongue of trade. So anywhere you went in the Roman Empire, somebody was going to speak Greek. Kind of like nowadays, if you go to any airport you go to, you're going to find somebody that speaks English.
Education itself was in Greek.
Education, well, that depends on where you're at, I guess. In Jesus' day, education, it would have been preserved in Greek, yes, because think about all your philosophers are writing in Greek. Your New Testament, your Greek New Testament's in Koine Greek. The Septuagint is in Greek, so that's what they would have gone with. Now the people at the temple in Jerusalem would have had Hebrew as well, I would imagine, and I'm sure that many of the rabbis would have had that as well.
When Jesus read from the scrolls, he was reading Greek.
I would have to go back and look at that. What we would look at is what is the quote from Isaiah. Does that come from the Septuagint or is that coming from something else? That's what I would, because it may be, I don't know, it may be one of those things where that came from somewhere else. I don't know. I haven't looked at that particular text. Is that a quote from the Septuagint? Is the question. I don't know that in that particular instance. I can look and find out. Maybe.
Certainly, the early Old Testament would have been written in Hebrew.
Okay, yeah. So the Old Testament, the entire Old Testament, with the exception of a couple of sections of Daniel, was written in Hebrew originally. Now the Hebrew was transmitted down by the Masoretes, the Masoretes came along later, but it was transmitted down by scribes. In the intertestamental period, the Hebrew then is translated into Greek. That's the Septuagint. And then the thing about the Masoretic text is this: is if the Masoretes found a document, a Hebrew text, and it had a tear in it, or a burn, or it was ripped, they would basically bury that, or they would burn it, or they would do away with it, and then copy it, and then do away with it. So that's why we don't have a lot of old Hebrew texts. We have older Septuagint Greek texts, but the Masoretic transmission techniques were so good. Like they wouldn't look at it and like write sentence for sentence. They would use a measuring instrument and measure at this particular point on the page versus this particular point on the page. This is the letter that goes here. They would copy letter by letter and they would measure out where every letter went. That's the sort of meticulous attention to detail that they gave in that transmission. So the Masoretic texts are far more reliable in terms of accuracy of transmission. The Old Testament, right? Now the Greek New Testament is kind of willy-nilly. It has a lot more text basis, but the transmission of it was sometimes haphazardly done. So, but that's because we have such a big body of text, we can get at to where errors occurred and things, so we can compare and that kind of thing. But I'm getting into sort of nerdy textual criticism theory. Jared should be here to explain that. He would nerd out even more than me.
You ever heard of Grant Jeffries?
I've heard the name.
Okay, he was during Desert Storm was in Israel with some Israeli computer scientists,
Mm-hmm.
and they were applying a equal letter distance sequence code computer program to the original Hebrew text,
Yeah.
the Old Testament, and they tried it on other great literary works like the Bhagavad Gita and Shakespeare and stuff, and it didn't really shake out on anything except for the original.
That's where I've heard his name. Okay, yeah.
And he wrote a couple books on it. One was the Fingerprint of God, and the other was the Handprint
Yeah.
of God.
I remember that now. Yeah.
And it's pretty convincing. I've got the one book, it's a double book, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of things that came out, but it was sensationalized by a more recent writer, Michael somebody that did the Bible codes,
Mhm.
and Grant Jeffries said that he believed that it was a authentication by God to show that the original Word of God was in fact supernatural, because so many things that came down through the centuries were recorded and encrypted into the Hebrew text. For instance, the name of a lot of the rabbis from Aaron on, and then like there are a lot of important significant dates, and then through Leviticus every 50 letters is Aaron. It spells Aaron, and there's a whole bunch of them, and a lot of them are overlaying similar themes in the Bible, like where Joseph was kidnapped and thrown into the holy ground.
Mhm.
There's a news story about a guy named Joseph Taldana that was kidnapped, and there was like headlines of his kidnappers that talked about whether they should kill him or not, and some that it was all like most of these things would come out when it would scan the whole Bible, but these little messages would come out in one or two chapters.
Yeah, and the way I view that though is that is something that you would need a computer to do or to replicate.
No doubt.
And the issue that I have with that sort of thing, and you mentioned it yourself, that it was sensationalized by somebody who came along with the Bible codes, and the Omega Code, I think is what it was called. And then, but the Word of God is meant for us to understand plainly, and that sort of thing could be accomplished. It could be God doing it. It also could be the deceiver doing it.
No, well, I believe it had to be God,
Not
because
he didn't write it. The deceiver doesn't write
Well,
it, but
when
he finds those things in there.
when you talk about how careful the Masoretic
Oh yeah, yeah,
copies were, and you think about how important it was to be letter per letter
yeah,
consistent in order to preserve these encryptions. And for instance, some of them are like they kind of authenticate the books of the Bible, because throughout the Old Testament, there's like every plant in the Bible or tree and stuff like that, just like within a particular chapter of the Bible. And these are all within that original Hebrew with multi-layers overlaid, and they analyze the statistical, possibility. We couldn't do it today even with our computers. So the ability to produce something like that is pretty, astounding. And he feels that it was done to give modern people the ability to say that, that there is supernatural inspiration, despite the fact that there's criticism by so many
yeah.
people that consider themselves, more educated than people in the past, which is, I don't think that's true at all.
Oh, I agree.
But
Yeah.
in view of that modern criticism, and it turns out there were many people like Da Vinci and other great scholars that were actually looking for and may have found little segments of the Bible code.
Yeah. That's where that sort of thing is easy to sensationalize.
Yeah.
And what I see that doing is I see that detracting from the message of the Bible, and people are going to read into it and find things in it,
Yeah.
and interpret it as whatever they want to. That's my take on it. Because I do remember when that came out, and that's where I've heard the name before. That's been 20 or 25 years ago, something like that. But I remember reading a little bit about that, and it's like, look, there's plenty in the Word of God that we can currently read that we ought to busy ourselves with. And Deuteronomy 29:29 tells us that, right? It tells us that the things revealed are ours and our children's forever. But the things that are hidden, they're God's. And so the scriptures, 2 Timothy, right, are breathed out by God. They're useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness, so that the man of God is thoroughly equipped for every good work. And the scriptures that Paul is talking about there, for sure, are the ones that you can read, and without the use of those things. So while there may be some, and who knows, maybe God did do something like that, but they're not necessary. You know,
You have to read it. I'm happy to share it with you. I'm totally convinced that it's real.
But again, it's unnecessary. It's
Well,
not what God
right,
intended for
but
us to read.
Sure, there's plenty of, if you really believe, if you're already a believer and you read and study the Bible, you see the inspiration jump off the page. But for people that are not believers, to be able to look at that stuff, because it was analyzed by Scotland Yard and the American Society of Statistics. And they, I guess.
Is that our 5-minute warning?
No.
there's a switch
Uh-oh,
further
5
on
minutes.
down. There's a switch down further, honey. It's on the wall. It's just a single switch, just by itself. You see it there? Okay. She's trying to find the light back there. Well, so, with the, is it 5 minutes, or are we 5 minutes over by now?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, there's just one or two more things there. This leads us to the development of what's known as the humanists. The humanists. So here we are. The Eastern Church has preserved the Greek text, the New Testament, all the philosophical texts, or all the various Greek authors. This leads to the rise of what's known as the humanists. Now, the humanists nowadays, different group, different belief system, and everything. Right, so the humanists nowadays are these guys who go around thinking that man is the measure of all things. That's not what this group is about. The vast majority of this group are priests and monks and Christian theologians. But the thing that they have in common, most of them are Roman Catholics. But the thing that they have in common is that they are getting this influx of all these Greek texts that they've never had access to. And they are starting to read them, and lo and behold, there are a lot of differences between the Greek text says, what the Latin text says, and what the church fathers said, and what the councils have decided, and what popes have declared. And so their rallying cry is ad fontes, interestingly enough, in Latin, and it means back to the source, or back to the fountain. And what this means is that they're going to go back to the original Greek text rather than the Latin text in order to start to understand what God has said. That's what they are committed to doing. And among people like this are a guy by the name of Martin Luther. He was a doctor of philosophy at Wittenberg College, doctor of theology, I'm sorry, at Wittenberg College. And he starts reading the Greek text of the Bible and realizing that there are some major differences here. We've got Ulrich Zwingli, and then we've got some people who stay Catholic, who are nonetheless humanists, but they're going back and turn that back on, baby, and studying Greek. It's going to be a club in here. Lights are
So
flashing.
did Martin Luther translate from Greek?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the German.
Yes, the German Bible's absolutely a direct translation. So translations of the Bible from the Greek into the languages of the people begin to pop up everywhere. Is she writing it down there for you? That's the last thing I have on here, so I'll leave that up.
So that's ad fontes.
Ad fontes.
To the sources.
To the sources, to the fountain, to the source. And the source in this instance happens to be the Greek Septuagint, the Greek New Testament, and there was you know, those are the ones that they're putting them, they're compiling them together, getting some critical text going, and that kind of thing. What was the guy's name? The Catholic guy?
Erasmus?
Yes, Erasmus of Rotterdam.
Yes, very important individual.
He's a humanist, but he's about that close to the Reformation, but he stays Catholic. And then
Responsible for a Greek translation.
yeah, well, he actually created the first Greek critical text. So and then that Greek critical text was used to translate into various other languages.
Why were they called humanists?
I don't know.
That's such a.
It's a loaded term now because we have the idea of what the 20th century humanists are like. They're not them at all. They're not them at all. So they were the humanists because it was sort of the rise of the humanities. Maybe, I don't know. It's the idea that they're looking into, or maybe the word humanities that we get that from is derived from them. I couldn't say. But
Humanitarian.
well, it wasn't that. No, they were not particularly interested in that. I mean, as a group interested in that. I'm sure there were plenty of them that were very humanitarian. But they were very much they were very much dedicated. Their main concern was going back to, as a group, their main concern was going back to the original sources and seeing what they had to say. So, for example, Aristotle. Up until now, Aristotle had been available mostly in Arabic. Actually, it's an Arabic translation from the Greek, but he originally was written in Greek, and that was available now to a lot of the people who had not had these things prior to this.
In Rome, because these scholars went to Rome.
Yeah, exactly. Now this fuels. You mentioned Leonardo da Vinci a minute ago. He's one of the massive figureheads of the Renaissance. Well, the Renaissance comes right. So right now we're getting to the Renaissance era. Actually, we're most of the way through it by now. These people are coming into the Western world. Not only Rome, but Rome is one of the areas that they are coming to. And they are bringing all of this learning, this Greek learning with them, and that is fueling this Renaissance. Renaissance in art. Art becomes less what do you call it? Symbolic and more realistic. So you've got people like Michelangelo drawing or doing a statue of David with an uncircumcised appendage. Interestingly enough, what was that's a statement being made, is it not? But if you've looked at the statue of David, it looks like a real man, right? It looks like a real human man, and it's not like a symbolism. He doesn't have Goliath's head in his hand and a sling in the other, and whatever else David might have as a saint. It's less symbolic, more realistic. What's that?
Well, it's French. Renaissance is French.
Renaissance is French? Okay.
It's
I was wrong.
humanism,
Both.
because they're-
Renaissance.
Because it was the study of humanity and
The humanists, is that? Okay.
classical virtues and potentials.
So the classical virtues comes directly from the Greek. So you've got Aristotle with his cardinal virtues and this sort of thing. Yeah.
Makes sense. Given what
I'm wondering if in Michelangelo's time, if circumcision was not as prevalent in society as it is in modern day America.
Well, yeah, yeah.
A lot of people are having their kids at home, and I doubt if the mother was circumcising these babies.
Well, yeah. So and they were not Jewish, and I mean, you read, scriptures like Galatians, which circumcision counts for nothing. So circumcision was more of a Christian ideal, believe it or not, or uncircumcision rather was more of a Christian ideal. Circumcision was more of a Judaism. That was from Judaism. They've maintained that, right? So yeah, that was why it's interesting that Michelangelo would have made David uncircumcised. David clearly would have been circumcised. But it seems like he's making a statement with that.
I'm just wondering if that would have been the norm, and if he had were to find a model in
Oh,
you know,
right.
modern day society at that time.
Yeah,
that
they
would've
would have been
the norm,
uncircumcised.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, that's possible.
but
So,
there's no doubt that David would have been circumcised.
oh yeah, without a doubt, clearly. All right, well, those are some examples of translations and the dates that are given on those translations. You see those happen just within a couple decades of each other, and the Reformation gets underway because now we have a Word of God that people can read for themselves. And it was Tyndale, I believe, that said that he wanted to make the average plowman as much of a theologian as the average bishop. You know,
Wow.
that's a loose.
I think he was a greater theologian than the Pope himself.
Was that it?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, I don't doubt it. Well, the Pope wasn't much of a theologian.
Maybe, yeah.
So,
Maybe this is a high bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So, but yeah, that was the sentiment. And what was interesting, and I did a study of this in college for a history class, that it was a secular college that I was at. But the incidence of literacy among nations where the Reformation had taken hold, so places like Germany, places like Switzerland, and even in England, the incidence of literacy there was far greater than in Roman Catholic dominated areas, because the people read the Bible for themselves. That's how they learned to read, and they were making those decisions based on the dictates of their own conscience. So yeah, what we see happening now, though, in the Renaissance, this is a prefiguration of the Renaissance and the Reformation, is the Roman Catholic Church gets hit with a challenge from science when the I can't remember his name now. Copernican revolution takes place. The Copernican revolution is where Nicholas Copernicus discovers or calculates that the Earth is not actually the center of the universe, but that the sun is the center of the solar system, and the Earth is moving around it. Galileo comes along with a telescope and confirms it, and almost gets burned as a heretic. But the church gets 1-2 punch. It gets a challenge in its authority from science. The church also gets a challenge from its ability to describe theological realities by the Reformation, because they cannot stand against the reformers when they're entering into debates, because that first generation of reformers who came out of the Catholic Church, they know all the Catholic dogma as well as the Catholics do, and they know the Bible better than the Catholics do, and they are just decimating them in their debates. And so that is destroying the Catholic Church in the area of theology. And then along comes a guy by the name of Henry VIII. And Henry VIII, he wants to marry somebody else. And at first, Henry VIII is granted the title the Protector of the Faith by Leo X.
And he smells like baked hot dogs.
No, that's a different one. That was Charles the Fifth,
Dad,
the
the one that
Holy
lived
Roman
during
Emperor.
Luther's time?
Yes, that would have been the emperor. But anyway, Henry VIII comes along, or is it Charles the Fifth or the Seventh? I don't remember. But anyway, the Holy Roman Emperor in Luther's day. Wet hot dogs. It's a Hans Feeny thing.
Baked hot dogs.
But then along comes Henry VIII, and he decides, who is the protector of the faith via Leo X, and he decides, you know what, I want a different wife. So I'm going to go have my marriage annulled. So Mr. Pope, since I'm the defender of the faith, why don't you annul my marriage? Well, no, I can't annul your marriage because I don't want to make the Spanish king mad, and you're married to his daughter. So the king says, well, here's the thing. I'm the king, and I'm going to take all your lands, and you need to get all your clergy out of the country, or we're going to kill them, because I'm the king. And I'm going to make my own church, and I'm going to be the head of my own church, and then I'm going to declare my marriage annulled and send my wife packing and her daughter packing, and then I'm going to set up my own church. So he establishes the Church of England. So the Church of England then challenges the Pope quite successfully on being able to do things in a political arena. So the authority of the church is challenged politically, it is challenged scientifically, and it's challenged theologically. God destroys the confidence of the people in the Catholic Church. And that leads to the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment. And those are later to come. So that's a next scene on church history, part 3. Yes.
Somehow the word Castilian, to me, or that's Castellan.
Yeah, Castellan.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I'm Castilian. I associate that with Spanish,
Yes.
Yeah.
but
The
that's
Castile, the
Castellan is
Castilian.
French. So that was the French Bible, Castellan.
But the French, that's put down pretty quickly. The Huguenots are pretty much slaughtered by the French royalty. But yeah. But the other ones are pretty successful. And there's Calvin too.
Were those all considered to be pretty good translations?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I've not read them. I know that Tyndale's translation does form about, I think, 80% of the King James Version. So the King James Version uses the Tyndale as a basis and say, they go through and judge whether or not that's a good translation and so forth. And when I say that, that's 1611 King James.
1611.
Yeah, you got the Geneva Bible coming in there as well. The Geneva Bible is preferred by the Puritans and by what would be the Pilgrims, because they don't like the fact that King James had a hand in translating the King James Version, so they hate that version. That's the King's Version.
So they were carrying the Geneva.
Yeah, when they came here, they had the Geneva Bible. Yep.
Did that come from the Geneva Bible? Come from directly from Greek, or was that from German?
No, the Geneva Bible would that would have been the Bible that it was translated from. It was translated from the Greek and the Hebrew, but it it has more of a Reformed bent to it than it does an Anglican bent.
Especially the notes associated with it.
Oh yeah, the notes are fire. They're really good. What's that?
That's Calvin, right?
Yeah, Calvin's Geneva. So what ends up happening is, so Henry VIII dies, right? His daughter Mary comes back, and she tries to turn the country back to Roman Catholicism. Thus the name Bloody Mary. Well, when she takes over, all of these middle class Christians who are part of the Church of England flee, and they go to Geneva, and they are trained by Calvin, or by, I think it was it Bucer who came after Calvin? So by Calvin's church at that point. He's dead at that point, but anyway, they get trained there for Bloody Mary's reign. When she gets deposed, Elizabeth takes over. Elizabeth has to, if she wants to sit on that throne, she has to be Anglican, because if she's Catholic, then she's a bastard, because her father, so she has no claim to the throne.
Right.
So she has to be English. She's very tolerant, of everybody, because I mean, she doesn't, this religious war has been a problem with her family and all that. So anyway, she reigns forever, but she invites the people on back in. So they come back, they form the Puritans. So they want to purify the Catholic Church, or the Anglican Church rather, because the Anglican Church is basically the Catholic Church in England, run by the English. So the Puritans then set up shop, and those are the Calvinists, that eventually become Presbyterians and London Baptists and everything. So that's sort of the pedigree that we're dealing with there. Then the Scots-Irish, they're the ones that are fighting against the Irish Catholics, So yeah, that.
Didn't Edward rule in there someplace?
What's that?
Didn't Edward rule in there someplace?
Edward was a very short reign. Yeah, he died. And then I think he was before Mary, but he was a sickly boy. And he a sickly man, but he died pretty quickly.
And then Jane Grey for 9 days, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. But then, I skipped over some because they're not the.
They didn't.
They didn't really do anything.
Okay. And then
Now Edward was Elizabeth's brother,
Right.
older brother. Actually, I think it was younger brother, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was younger. Yeah.
But yeah, he reigned because he was the male heir, but he died.
Elizabeth's mother was Boleyn,
Yeah.
and Jane.
She was
or,
the side chick.
Edwards was Jane Seymour. Yeah, because she was after Balloon.
Yes, that would have been right. Yes. Sorry, I'm not ready for that one right now. Yes, go ahead.
No, I just,
Dismiss us.
I
Like-
know the English.
Yeah.
part. Yeah, yeah, but I didn't know that, I didn't know if they had